Good afternoon or good morning.
Hello.
I see Evan updating the meeting notes, but not on the call yet.
Dedication.
I've done that before where I'm furiously typing away and I forget, oh, I have to join the call. We'll give folks a few minutes. Hey, Evan.
Hello. How is everyone today?
Wonderful. Trying to decide if my strobe lights still work.
Very nice. I like the raise your hand one, but I never, I just can't bring myself to turn it to enable those. I also really like the idea of the the Mac center stage, but the implementation is so distracting. Like,
I think I'm on the wrong call. This is the chairs and tech leads call. I thought this was supposed to be the general meeting.
this is the
This
yeah.
is the general meeting.
We need to recruit more attendees general meeting.
We're important people. More people should want to listen to us talk for an hour.
At the chair and tech leads meeting, I strongly encouraged us to do a better job promoting the great community demos that we would like to do. And then I posted my last minute community demo 5 minutes before this call. So I did
Yeah.
not go with my own advice.
I actually also was thinking about something to discuss as part of this, but
I can defer for another week and then let you do
yours
something
yours
interesting.
might be more generally useful for people. So I'm just supposing because mine is possibly more niche. So maybe that like mine isn't, or I don't know how like yeah. We could also just discuss both if there are better things to do.
You put your demo in the schedule?
So I don't have permissions to edit that document.
Oh,
But I put it in my Slack message in the tag security and compliance Slack channel. So also thought if folks want to chat about the NPM package compromise at all, we probably would have a time for that.
is yeah. Is there interesting stuff that's now known that is worth discussing?
I mean, we could plan a debate for next week, possibly, on this topic about whether NPM, something like is NPM doing enough?
I mean, separate from the debate, I do think that there's a couple of things that are probably worthwhile to chat through because one of the things I was surprised by talking to a few sort of end users who were like actually impacted by this, and I was like, oh, well, if you have lock files, you shouldn't have pulled that in unless you just so happened to have built at that time that it was compromised. And a surprising amount of people were like, oh, we don't use lock files. And every time we deploy out, we actually just install whatever's latest. And I was like, that's a bad practice for years. Like I remember that being a bad practice during the left pad days. And before that. So I think like I still think that there's something like there, which is more of like uh I don't know how you would kind of describe us, like it's, ivory tower or whatever, but it's like there's a lot of folks out there who are doing security things who are still unfamiliar with a lot of like just baseline set of practices that are kind of interesting. And I think also another thing that kind of came out of that was a lot of tools will actually fail open, which was also surprising to me. So a lot of scanners, what was happening was, are you impacted by this? Well, let's look for your package lock file. And if you don't have a package lock file, it just says everything's good. As
Well-
opposed to saying, hey, it looks like you're using npm, but you don't have a package lock file. That to me is a critical failure. The first step is to build a package lock file and then kind of go from there. So,
Well,
so
but
there's
if
like
you built
certain
a
things
package lock file not during the time that those vulnerable versions were live, technically you weren't vulnerable when you were checked. But yes, I agree with you.
Yes, because it's you are Schrodinger's vulnerable, right? Like you're vulnerable only at time of like dependency resolution potentially.
So it sounds
Should
like
we-
Anyway.
Mike and Evan are volunteering to do the debate next week.
Sure.
Do you each want to
Brett.
pick a side and then we can announce it and get people to come? Anyone want to be like, this was not a big deal, it's overblown, and the other person is like, this is a terrible deal? Is that a good way to divide this?
I mean, we could also divide it by folks should be defending themselves, and tooling providers should be defending you for you, so you don't have to think about it.
But I think that's possible, but also I wonder if you're completely in opposition on all the potential points.
I mean, we're probably not.
No, but I mean, you for the purposes of the debate, like
Yeah.
you end up taking positions that you don't actually hold.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be interesting.
Mike, do you want to coordinate after this two positions, one that you'd be happy to take and one that I'd be happy to take?
Sure, yeah. I free up a little later this afternoon and yeah, we can
Okay.
chat.
I was just gonna also start on Slack and
Yep. Yeah, that's fine.
I think kind of
Brent?
in that same vein as Mike, what Mike was saying, like best practices, like obviously everyone's going to throw the book at people and be like, hey, do this. I thought there were some interesting posts of people that were just like kind of in alignment with maybe one of those sides. Hey, this isn't something to stay up all night trying to remediate. The likely chance that you were impacted is pretty slim. And so like given all of that, my brain just goes back to like for tag security, like is there something that doesn't exist that should exist that is like what did we learn from this for sake of the CNCF that you could be doing that would like remove this headache from your project entirely? Is it like a dependency review action in CI? Is it Dependabot ignores and being proactive about that? Like, is there something that could have been done? Or something that you should do, some response that isn't, stay up all night for 3 days trying to adjudicate yourself when you weren't actually impacted?
That is a very good question.
I don't know, I was aired towards the like the human side of things. Like somebody just needs to empathize with the fact that like somebody's gonna see those articles and be like, oh no, I searched our GitHub organization for those things and we use that dependency, like halt everything. And like you just lost, many person hours by like trying to resolve something that you were probably not impacted by. So is there a way to like just, learn from this and implement something so as the next time that happens and some leadership persona or some security persona who doesn't have the full context is like, hey, this happened again. Like, no, here's what we have in place now so that we don't have to spend time on this. And I think the answer also may be no. There may be nothing that it is to be done here.
So should it be added to our catalog of supply chain attacks that we have? Because I kind of thought that it could be helpful from a pattern identification perspective, and then maybe that's how you save those human hours by saying like, does it meet this pattern? What did I do last time that worked, or what are other people doing that's working? For remediation or identifying if you need to do some sort of remediation.
Yes, we should do that. That's a very good idea.
The last
before-
updates to that seem to be 2024 to the catalog of supply chain compromises. So there's probably a bunch that we haven't done.
I know that I've seen some PRs within the last year. One of the things that I think that was added was what doesn't count as a supply chain compromise, because it's one of these things where we reached an inflection point where many security compromises or vulnerabilities became supply chain compromises somehow. So codifying that I think was helpful. But yeah, there are many other actual legitimate supply chain attacks that we should add. And we jumped right into conversation. So before we continue conversation, I will remind everyone, and hopefully you're not too offended by this happening 15 minutes in, that this is a meeting that's being recorded and will be posted to LFX and hopefully YouTube shortly after this. Your participation in these meetings is in agreement to abide by the Cloud Native Security Code of Conduct, which can be found in the repo. And Evan has kindly volunteered to scribe for us. So that is much appreciated. If anyone else wants to jump in there, feel free to do so as well. And it looks as though most folks are already in the notes document. But if not, I will share a link in the chat. And I can do my quick community demo if, unless there's anything else folks want to say about the NPM packages stuff, or we can also save that for next week. All right, I will.
This is unverified, but I'm pretty sure the NPM attack on the Bitcoin thing, the browser scraping, I think it was like $50. Like there was, it could have been many more zeros, but it was found within a few hours, but it is sobering. Like all of them.
Yeah, I think it's like, even though the impact of this one was so small, like if it was done separate, like you've done it in a different way and whatever, that could be pretty significant.
I think the coolest thing, lastly, was like the addresses that were like changed. They actually used a difference, like a I can't remember the exact algorithm, but they used a way to make, the spoofed, or not the spoofed, the modified address was meant to be like visually close, so it's easy to miss. It was kind of creative.
All right. I will go through this a bit faster than my actual presentation because I think folks here probably have a lot of background and context on this already. But this is the talk I gave at Open Source Summit EU on the public sector working groups work on building out a reference architecture. They made some really cool diagrams and such that I thought are fun to share. So first and foremost, credit to all of the actual authors of that. And I know Brandt's name is not on here, but he was involved in some of the conversations as well too. So people don't need to know more about who I am because I think you and once again the software supply chain compromises happen and they're still happening and we haven't solved all of the problems even though we wrote this great best practices guide. Apparently not everyone listened. The Friday before giving this talk was when the GitHub registry container.io spoofing started, or typo squatting started, which was an interesting thing to bring up as this is still happening. This is an interesting one. If you would consider this a supply chain, it's not a sort of compromise, maybe it's an ongoing attack. I don't know if this domain is still up or not. That's a separate. I'd be interested to know. I haven't checked. And we're seeing lots of great responses to this and things, even though we're still seeing attacks are getting better. This is one thing that I brought up for public sector. I don't know if folks have seen the easy JSON
Okay.
stuff. Justin?
Sorry, just want to interject really quick. At least when I go to that site, NYU flags and says that this site has known malicious activity, and so it's being blocked from our networks. So whether or not the actual site is still reachable, other places might depend on what your corporate network or whatever. Of course. Whatever your corporate network or other things are doing to this, but there seems to be some general awareness that the GitHub container registry squatting site is malicious.
Yeah, that would be a great thing for GitHub to block, especially with GitHub Actions, like not allowing people to reach out to that. Yeah. So this is kind of about the EasyJSON library, which turns out there was an issue filed under the Kubernetes repo as well, that the library is maintained by mail.ru, which is a Russian-owned entity. And there was a security audit of everything, and nothing was found to be malicious yet, which is kind of the thing. If we know that these potential future compromises are out there, what do we do about those? And so we follow the best practices and secure things the best we can because there will always be new and emerging things. And this is I did a index of changes in the term. This is about the R tag security and compliances best practices, the diff between the original version of the supply chain best practices and the new one. You can see the increase of terms that were referenced. So a lot more about SBOMs, a lot more about policy, and a lot more about attestations and attesting things. Vex did not exist, so that's a net plus 20. Most everything else here was referenced in some form in the original paper, but just these things much more. And many of these projects or the implementations of the specifications did not exist when we wrote the original best practices paper. So the public sector side was kind of looking at this recent update and what specific guidance or problems do they have. Some of the big things are the regulatory frameworks and requirements, air-gapped environments. The other part here, no standard for non-public root of trust. And so this is more of how do they establish a root of trust across their set of trusted organizations or suppliers and things like that, and how do they understand what to trust where. And of course, that the idea of consuming all of these things, and the idea of the public good is a little bit harder, or a lot harder, in these types of organizations. And so how part of what this group wanted to do was propose a publicly hosted, or not publicly, but within the government hosted version of things like the public good instance of SigStore for suppliers to government organizations to have a sort of a federated trust model potentially. And so looking at the architecture itself here, the high level overview of this is kind of looking at how you can have essentially this two-tier system of suppliers being able to provide software, open or closed source, and providing not only the software, but verifiable metadata about that. And so at the top, there is this idea of assigning infrastructure, supplier infrastructure to be able to ship the software and the artifacts to a shared registry, and then also being able to have that shared infrastructure for signing itself that's based on the identity of the supplier, and then consumers being able to verify that, but then once again, essentially do all of the same things that the producers of software are or vendors are doing for their own software. So essentially just repeating the same cycle over again. And so they referenced many of the open source projects in this area. So being able to sign with identity-based signing for the software that they're supplying. This is where the external issuer of the certificates becomes one of these things where can they establish a bridge of the identity provider of these software providers and the central sort of shared root of trust. And then the vendors producing their own secure software itself, hopefully, and doing specific things like producing artifacts that are FIPS compliant. They're using the appropriate cryptographic libraries, things like that, hopefully generating attestations for all of these things, and signing the end packages, things like that, and then publishing them to the shared registry. And what are the sorts of artifacts for trust to distribute other than the software itself, but things like signed SBOMs, VEX statements, attestations, salsa build provenance, and then upon ingestion of this, how do you want to have policies around verification of should this thing even be allowed to be transferred into these additional sort of environments, air-gapped or within specific departments or organizations within the government, and then being able to have a place to store the artifacts in a container registry using OCI as a standard for that, storing in toto attestations and things like Archivista or others, and then also having RSTUF as another capability here to be able to have that extra layer of understanding as you consume and pull these things down, what should be trusted. And then you're just kind of blowing this up as well. Again, it's very hard to see on a large screen, and maybe even on your screens now. But then essentially consuming all of this software, the things that you have as either dependencies or even just maybe software you want to deploy and run. What does this inner loop look like as you build more software? The public sector working group called out a couple of vendor pieces of software specifically because they are used in some of these existing deployments today, things like Ironforge or other things to they were the vendors that were selected for within the US DoD. So they're not necessarily an endorsement of that, but just knowing that those are things that exist there today. And then once again, kind of other than repeating the same loop, also what are the additional things that you can do looking at things like Open Policy Agent or SigSource Policy Controller to have that policy enforcement at that layer. And then also along the bottom, doing this sort of analysis, whether it's with Guac or Dependency Track, being able to produce additional SBOMs, which once again feed back into potentially the policy enforcement later on and other things over time. And then I think the other part of this is the air-gapped environments, and so being able to support verification of all of these things across that. We got the cute little Zarf logo in here as well. All of these metadata pieces could also be transported across those air gaps and verified in the future. And then the similar things here I spoke to besides the different types of evaluation. Also, runtime monitoring is another thing. So over time, the software, the entropy always increases, right? So the software decays and becomes more vulnerable over time. Yeah, so that's like a super fast speed run of that. I see some. Okay, yeah. And what's next? You should come and join the group and contribute. The public sector user group has a community calendar meeting. They meet on Thursdays, Thursday afternoon-ish, US for most US time zones, and they're always looking for more folks to show up and participate, or who are just interested in learning. So yes, it is definitely applicable to you. So you should join. Yeah, and so I will stop there. These slides are on the Sketch link from Open Source Summit EU. If
They're
anyone
in the
wants
meeting
to,
notes too.
perfect. And yeah, the recording of the full talk is also available, I think, but I have not yet looked for it. So.
Can you repeat the meeting details? I did not get those down quickly enough.
Yes,
Or if it's in the PDF, I can just grab it out of the PDF.
yeah, the link for the community group is there.
Okay, great. I will do that then.
Yeah, and they do have a formal white paper that they're working with the CNCF to publish, but it has not made it through the full process. There's a draft on the GitHub repo that's also linked on that same page. So if folks are interested in a preview of it. So yeah. So
I also
you-
brutally shortened your presentation to a single paragraph. If I have done it wrong, please fix it.
I will take a look. And I think that is perfectly reasonable. The other pitch I will give right now is that was my super lightning version of a community demo, and you all should also do community demos in the future. So let us know if you are interested in that, and it would be cool to see more of these. All right.
Let's see. I think you have a typo in one of your two slide links. It's you lost an H on GitHub and it redirects to a different site.
That is good to know. I think I can still update the slides on Sketch. I will try and do that.
Apparently GitHub somehow redirects you to Banggood, which is a like like an Ali Express type of place.
All right. So after the community demo on the agenda, we have the review other time zone meetings, which I don't believe there have been any since last week. However, if you are around this evening, they will have the APAC meeting. So if you would like another round of conversations about all things exciting tax security and compliance, you should join then. TUC meeting updates. There was not a meeting this last Tuesday, I don't believe. And is the next TOC meeting the sandbox project reviews? It may be. That's not a public meeting. So moving on to project updates. We have the so maybe more generally, I will share the updates as the tag charters are approved. The TOC has reiterated the tags ability to be able to create their own sub projects and initiatives within the scope of the approved charter, and so that will be nice for us. I know we've had a lot of conversation about process and approval processes and things like that in the past, but hopefully some of that can become a little bit lighter weight going forward within the scope of the tag itself. And with that, Matt, did you or Evan want to give an update on the current initiative?
Yeah, I could briefly cover some of the design work I've done over the last few weeks, and I'm starting to implement like an MVP grade end to end, realizing this. So if I could share my screen real quick, I'll just pull up a picture and talk to it for a minute rather than I will say that some of the links and docs have been furiously rapidly written, and I tend to alliterate and be overly verbose, and then I have to go hack it down later. So there are a few diagrams and typos and things like that that are a little wonky, but with that sort of caveat emptor, okay, sure. So so I put a couple links in there, but this was the thing I wanted to talk to that's sort of like the one current picture. As context, the efforts that Mario and the CNCF team, who are not technically part of the supply chain initiative, but are adjacent to it and are and are doing what they're doing in the open. The overall approach they're doing is for CNCF projects now. They've got a Guac instance that they've provisioned on local hardware, and they're generating all of the SBOMs themselves, and then ingesting it just to kind of get something up and running. The approach I'm taking for one of N reference architectures, I know Brent's working on one based on Zarf, but I have wanted to take a slightly different approach. There's a better diagram in the detailed design document, but I'll just go there. I'll come back to this one. I wanted to do something a little more scalable without needing a lot of infrastructure resources, like one big Guac instance with all of the CNCF projects, for example. And so the thinking is that projects, when they produce SBOMs, can run a CI job or an action that runs a small dgraph instance that's ephemeral, that exists long enough to ingest those SBOMs, enrich them, and then publish as artifacts and RDF export in NQuad format of all of the nodes and edges. And then potentially, and I would hope, when they cut a release, that's part of the artifacts that are produced, because it compresses quite well. And then later, in sort of a supergraph subgraph architecture, or a hub and spoke architecture, where spokes, when you want to say, I want to get all of these SBOMs, some from open source and perhaps some, if I'm an end user, from my own internal builds, and then mix and match, you can just fan out and fetch all of these little RDF bits and then bulk load them into something that can serve a GraphQL API at much higher scale than perhaps Guac can. And that's not to say Guac can't scale, but operationally you're running, you know, you're running a lot of stuff. And the 1.0 version of Guac doesn't have like case studies or published numbers around how does it scale and to what level does
So
it.
you're assuming that it's not going to scale sufficiently, but you haven't measured it yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Let me go back because
That's fine. You're planning for scalability.
I'm planning for scale. Yeah, I'm planning for not just scalability, but a workflow that can sort of amortize the cost of generating all of these enriched graphs, you know, per project or per SBOM or per small set of SBOMs out to CI paid for by GitHub in the case of open source projects, right? And then just have artifacts that they can also be pulled in a fan out, you know, way.
I understand.
Assemble.
We've talked about this before. I do think that you are going a little beyond MVP. If you're worrying about scaling,
That may be. I'm not. I'm focusing now on just. I've got like a primordial CI job that sort of can do this, and the initial Docker Compose based environments to run Guac in a lightweight way, and then prove out that this works. There are a few notable complications with just directly using the Guac GraphQL API as it is in a federation context, and also from a GraphQL client context that are probably beyond the scope of what we want to talk about. But I'm actually using GraphQL Mesh to wrap the Guac API in a facade pattern, if anybody likes the old Gang of Four book, to fix two primary issues that complicate clients in a downstream federation context.
I think you're getting into some higher levels of detail than we need right here.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just mention two of them. One is global object IDs, and the other is mitigating the node union anti-pattern that we see, where we have unions of types that make clients have to be able to handle all of the different types that are unioned together. So that GraphQL mesh layer in a declarative way can mutate that API and provide resolvers once, so that what is actually exported is ready for federation and cannot suffer from that complicated client demand that the node union pattern in the existing API puts in place. It's not broken or understandable. It's just more of a federation and scalability issue. And there are deep dives into that. The repo I shared, I have to put a Creative Commons license on it as well as Apache, but it's mostly just specware at the moment, and I've got some local stuff running. I'm hoping to get to something that I could demo maybe by next week. So that's that. I'd love feedback if anybody likes to read long documents that are perhaps verbose. But in a subsequent step, I'll try to prune them down. But
Awesome. Thanks for the update,
and
Matt.
then as to the project plan, I've been kicking that ball down the road a little bit. But now that everyone's back from summer, I hope this week to have at least a high level GitHub roadmap and last week, or was it earlier this week at our last on Monday, 2 days ago, we kind of talked about what some of the high level epics there are, you know, producing or curating documentation, demonstrators, reference architectures, things like that. I haven't had a chance to sync with everybody yet. I know Brant's working on a Zarf based reference architecture as well. And then the last thing we need to figure out is what's the interplay and exchange between the new community group that is nascent around supply chain security and this initiative. But we are aiming to scope the initiative quite narrowly to the two primary questions that stem out of the CNCF's need to handle CRA. you know, what happens when a vulnerability happens and how do we mitigate license changes over time. So I'll try to be brief, bright, and gone. So with that, thanks. And if anyone's interested in collaborating on any of this stuff, I'm doing it in the open. I made a GitHub org a year or two ago called Graphtastic, which I think is neat because there's like Graphtastic this and Graphtastic that.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Next up, we have security assessments. I think I did have my PR accepted to update the code owners for security assessments. So the folks in the tag security and compliance leadership can review and approve those PRs so they get merged in. I did, Brant, see on your PR, I think some feedback from different TOC members though. So I wonder if there is a process or anything else we want to go to kind of follow to ensure that if folks from that group would like to provide feedback, they have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, that's great feedback. I need to revisit that one. I think I saw Justin was also participating in getting that pushed up to date if we're talking about the same PR. And so I'll go revisit that and make sure we have what we need to make progress.
I think it was merged, so
Awesome. Even better.
yeah. Are there any other current security assessments that are in progress worthy of an update?
Well, it looks like the supply chain technical community group got approved and created, which is not directly related to us, but seemed worth mentioning. And I think last week, Jen took an item maybe to connect with Brant and see what we might do around automated compliance where we had previously 1 or 2 sub projects. I don't know if there's anything to say there right now.
Nothing yet. I think we'll be talking about it a bit more later in the week, and then probably next week might have an update.
Yeah. Additionally, I think Jen and I were on the same wavelength for the C in tag SC, the compliance and tag security and compliance, and what are we doing about it? And so I think there's opportunities to maybe start to refine and scope that into something that's valuable.
Awesome. Looking forward to hear about that. And if folks are listening to the recording or others, feel free to always just either create an issue with thoughts or ideas you have on that, or start a conversation in the Slack channel because you know we have lots of good ideas, but other folks have ideas that are just as good, if not better, because of the different backgrounds they bring. So. Let's see here. Triage. Any other project updates or things like that? All right. Triage of current issues. I don't see anything that was opened recently on the TOC board with our tag. With the label for our tag, get the terminology right. There's a couple of security reviews, assessments on their KCP is one of them, and I don't know if yeah, I see Justin and Eddie each responding in there, so I think we may be waiting on them. Yeah, and the identity and access management paper is still ongoing as well. So if you haven't had a chance to review that, and I know Evan last week you re-responded. I think it's the second time we were tagged on the supply chain security maturity model issue. This might be an interesting one to bring up with the community group if folks there are interested in collaborating or helping out on that, which is maybe a more general question we can chat with Marina about because she was one of the leads for the technical community group of how we should think about the relationship between the tag and the technical community group. So I think that would be something for us to figure out as time goes on. Are there any? I haven't looked at the tag security issues. Let me just pull that up quick and see. I do not see anything new on here either. So yeah, I think the issues are good. General stand-up and check-ins from partner groups. I don't know. Do we have any partner groups? I'm not sure even who this would be. But all right. And then next week, community demo. Look at this. We've got Mike and Evan already scheduled here. So this debate will be fun and exciting. And confidential containers incubation. Let me just look at this.
I don't know if we already got a presentation from them, but it seems like it could be nice.
Yeah, it looks like there is a link to under tax security issue 1320. This is going back to 2024. So yeah, they presented, I think, in the EMEA meeting, but if their incubation proposal is still open, I'm sure they've done some things in the last year.
Yeah, I don't know that we have to get them back, but if we were looking for content, it seemed like it might be worthwhile to have them come present again.
Yeah. All right. Any other business for today?
Do you want me to reach out to Confidential Containers to see if they'd like to do another presentation?
Sure. I think that would be
Okay.
And then after this call, we'll see if Yoshiyuki verified our YouTube account. So hopefully we will have a video that uploads and I think usually it's a few hours after this. If not, Evan, I think you were uploading some of the other past videos.
I uploaded the one that was actual demo.
Demo.
Partially so I could close out the issue.
One of the other things we had chatted about doing was uploading excerpts of the videos, especially for the community demos and presentations. So that might be something else that's not too difficult to do, but also
you can
useful.
also create a clip, although there may be limits on the length of a clip.
Okay.
On the other hand, I'm not volunteering to figure that out. Only telling you what I saw in the YouTube interface when I was trimming down the excess from the Monday meeting, where we got like 40 minutes recorded of just random kibitzing between Matt and I.
All right. Cool. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and hopefully you'll come back again next week to see a great debate between Mike and Evan about NPM packages. All right. Thanks, everyone.